Okay, we have a lot of wild breaking news to cover, and these two stories really highlight the dichotomy between the two parties at play right now. We just learned that Donald Trump's administration launched their eighth strike against a random boat in the sea with no due process, no evidence, no chain of custody when it comes to like prosecuting people, just endlessly, blindly striking boats in the sea. Now, it was in the Caribbean Sea before, but they just launched their first anti-drug strike in the Pacific side of South America. This is the eighth total attack during this pressure campaign, and it's all entirely BS. I was researching this for a debate a few weeks back, and the more research I did, the more I realized this administration is lying about everything. When it comes to drugs entering the country illegally, the vast majority of them come through ports of entry, mainly at the southern border, but not just people smuggling it, like crossing the border. They do it through really clever ways, through the ports of entry in vehicles. So they go through the legal ports and they smuggle it that way. Striking random boats coming from Venezuela is not a way to minimize the amount of drugs coming into the country, because Venezuela is not a narco state on the scale that this administration is describing. You can't shoot small random boats going through international waters and with no due process or no evidence claim that those were drug boats. They could have very well been fisher boats. Now, here's the thing. Do I want drug boats coming into America? Of course not. No one does. No Democrat is advocating for that. But what we're trying to do is live in reality and say that you can't just strike random boats in the ocean. While this was happening, Governor Gavin Newsom announced that he's also using the state military of California, but this shows you where the priorities of the two parties lie. While Donald Trump has the government shut down because he doesn't want to give people health care, he's deciding to use our military to strike random boats with no due process or no actual evidence, no transparent predicate for the use of lethal force. Meanwhile, Governor Gavin Newsom deployed his National Guard to support food banks statewide. Listen to this. California is stepping in as the ongoing government shutdown threatens food access for millions. Governor Gavin Newsom on Wednesday announced the deployment of the California National Guard and California volunteers to support food banks nationwide. The move comes as SNAP benefits are delayed for 5.5 million Californians. The state is also fast-tracking up to $80 million in emergency funding, so there's a fundamental mismatch between the way the two parties use the military and try to intimidate people. Donald Trump is trying to intimidate the American people by deploying the National Guard of, let's say, California or Chicago, Illinois, or the National Guard of DC to intimidate people for a short period of time and make a point. Governor Gavin Newsom is deploying the National Guard to help the people of his state against whatever Donald Trump is doing to them, like the lack of food, the lack of governmental assistance, the lack of SNAP benefits. Military members are being affected disproportionately by this because a lot of military members rely on government assistance. And it's sickening. Governor Gavin Newsom then said, California is deploying the California Guard to quickly assist families whose federal food benefits are halted because of Donald Trump's government shutdown. We won't let the GOP's cruel inaction force millions of Californians to go hungry. His press office then said, millions of Americans rely on food benefits to feed their families, and while Republicans in Washington drag their feet, California is stepping up once again to fill the gaps. We then see Governor Gavin Newsom tweeting about the White House destruction, saying, Donald Trump doesn't want you to see this picture. He is quite literally destroying the White House. And I'll say he is destroying America. By the way, make sure you drop a like and subscribe to the Adam Mockler feed below. But what really frustrates me with all of this, not with Governor Gavin Newsom, but with Donald Trump striking these boats, using our military to basically start new wars or get us closer to new wars, while Governor Gavin Newsom is trying to play cleanup with all of the literal destruction that Donald Trump is enacting on the American people, especially people in California. What really pisses me off is that Donald Trump has used tariffs to say that he's already fixed the drug problem. I've gotten in so many debates over the last 8 months where people are like, Donald Trump tariffed Mexico and Canada to try to have less drugs crossing the border, and Republicans claim that it worked. But It hasn't worked. We still have drugs coming through ports of entry. Donald Trump hasn't actually fixed any problem. He just makes announcements and acts like he fixes the problems. And then here we are, months later, months and months after Donald Trump placed tariffs on our neighboring countries and said he was trying to stop the flow of drugs. And we still have drugs flowing in, to such an extent that Donald Trump is targeting random countries. There's a few reasons why you can't just strike boats. But the United States today carried out another strike against an alleged drug trafficking vessel Tuesday night, this time on the Pacific side of South America, marking the first such attack outside of the Caribbean. The strike, the 8th known since September 2nd, killed at least 2 people aboard the vessel, the officials said. Previous U.S. operations under the Trump administration's new counter-narcotics campaign targeted boats in the Caribbean, where at least 34 people have been killed in similar strikes. Keep in mind, this is not me saying that I like people smuggling drugs into the country. I am not defending criminals here. I'm just defending due process. I'm defending international law and domestic law. I mean, in the U.S. criminal system, suspects are entitled to arrest, counsel, indictment. You get lawyers. You get to make your case. There is nowhere, not only in the U.S., but in international law, that says the United States can just start striking people over and over and over. Regional officials confirmed to the New York Times that the strikes have not eliminated drug trafficking, but have instead pushed smugglers to adapt, dividing shipments into smaller loads, concealing narcotics in food containers, or conducting sea transfers farther from monitored zones. Again, we want to minimize the amount of drugs that come into the United States, both through ports of entry, and if there are drugs, which there are some small amounts of drugs that come through this way, we want to disincentivize that in the most harsh way possible. We can't just have one administration striking every single boat that goes through the Pacific and the Caribbean Ocean, because that is not a long-term solution. We don't want to turn the U.S. into a hyper-militaristic state, or at least Democrats don't. Democrats don't want to militarize the U.S. Donald Trump seems to want to have the military in the streets of every single major blue city. He seems to want to use the military to isolate the country by attacking countries like Greenland, saying, well, I won't rule out military force. And now, I'm just trying to be nuanced here. If there are boats with drugs in the sea, we should intercept them. We should arrest them. They should get due process. They should be, tried in a court of law. If you want to execute somebody, we have mechanisms for that in the United States. It's called the death penalty. You don't just get to do it extrajudicially in the middle of the sea and claim that they were drug traffickers after the fact. What happens if in the Pacific Ocean we accidentally do strike a fisherman's boat, and these fishers had Americans on the boat? It would be tragic. It's tragic overall. I'm going to leave it there. If you appreciate these videos, if you appreciate what we do, make sure you drop a like and subscribe to the Adam Mockler feed. I'll see you all in the next one. Peace out.